Many parents today find themselves caught in a bewildering cycle. Their young adult lands a job, starts with a burst of optimism, and then, seemingly overnight, the momentum vanishes. Within days or weeks, the narrative shifts. A minor correction from a supervisor is labeled as toxic management. A repetitive task is described as soul-crushing. A standard 8 a.m. start time is framed as an impossible burden on their mental health. Before the first paycheck even clears, the young adult announces they are quitting. The parental response is usually a mixture of disbelief and logic. You might point out that every job has its downsides, or that work isn't supposed to be fun all the time. When these rational arguments fall flat, it's easy to label the behavior as entitlement or a lack of work ethic. However, if we look beneath the surface, we see that this isn't necessarily a rebellion against work. It is a nervous system in crisis. The anatomy of the eject button. What we are witnessing is a profound frustration tolerance gap. For many young adults, especially those navigating ADHD, anxiety, or a history of over-scaffolded support, the workplace is the first environment where they encounter unfiltered friction. Unlike school or home, the workplace does not adjust its expectations to accommodate their immediate emotional state. Anxiety. Avoidance. When a manager offers feedback, a neurodivergent or anxious brain may interpret that friction as a high-level threat. The amygdala triggers a fight or flight response. Quitting is the flight. It provides an immediate, powerful hit of relief that reinforces the idea that the only way to feel safe is to leave. The boredom is pain. Threshold. For the ADHD brain, repetitive tasks aren't just dull. They are neurologically painful. Without the hit of dopamine that comes from novelty, the friction of the mundane feels insurmountable. The perfectionism paralysis loop. Many young adults harbor a deep fear that if they aren't immediately naturals at a job, they are failing. Quitting allows them to preserve their ego by leaving before they can be proven incompetent. Why the entire family view matters. From a Bowen family systems perspective, we have to ask, how does the family system respond to this quitting cycle? Often, a parent's own anxiety about their child's future leads them to overfunction. When the young adult quits, the parent might experience a spike in stress and immediately begin searching for the next job for them, or providing financial cushions that prevent the young adult from feeling the natural friction of unemployment. When we remove the consequences of quitting, we unintentionally teach the young adult's nervous system that ejecting is a viable long-term strategy. This prevents the neuroplasticity required to build a workplace callus, the ability to stay engaged even when the environment is non-ideal. To bridge this gap, we must stop viewing quitting as a character flaw and start viewing it as a developmental delay in resilience. The workplace is a high-resistance gym. If a person has never lifted low-stakes weights at home, they will naturally buckle under the high-stakes weight of a 40-hour work week. The goal is not to find the perfect, non-toxic job, because no such thing exists. The goal is to help the young adult build the capacity to endure the non-ideal. This requires us to hold the line at home, allowing healthy friction to exist so that the nervous system learns that discomfort is not a signal to quit, but a signal to grow. Welcome back to the Path to Peace Therapy podcast. If you're new here, my name is Stephanie Buckley. I'm a solution-focused therapist, parenting strategist, and family systems coach who specializes in ADHD, executive functioning challenges, emotional regulation, and the patterns that keep families stuck in cycles of frustration, avoidance, and conflict. Solution-focused therapy focuses on identifying practical strategies that help families move forward. Rather than staying stuck analyzing problems, This approach emphasizes building small changes that create momentum and restore confidence within the family system. Another framework that deeply informs my work is Bowen Family Systems Theory. Bowen's work emphasizes that individuals cannot be fully understood outside the emotional system of the family. Families develop patterns over time, and when one member struggles with motivation, responsibility, or emotional regulation, the entire system often adapts around that struggle. For example, when a young adult repeatedly quits jobs, parents may respond in different ways. One parent may step in to financially support the young adult while they figure things out. Another parent may become increasingly frustrated and push harder for independence. The young adult may then withdraw further or feel overwhelmed by expectations. Bowen Family Systems theory helps families understand that these dynamics are not simply individual behaviors. They are patterns within the emotional system of the family. And when one piece of the system shifts, the entire pattern can begin to change. I'm also a mother to a thriving neurodivergent 23-year-old son with ADHD, who is an incredible musician, singer, songwriter, and multi-instrumentalist. Supporting him required patience, structure, and a deep understanding of how developing brains respond to challenge and responsibility. This podcast exists because when my son was younger, I did not fully understand what was happening in his brain. And I know many parents listening today are asking the same question. Why does everything feel so hard for my child? Today, we're continuing our series on Gen Z's aversion to friction. And in this episode, we're going to explore why some young adults struggle to stay in jobs long enough to develop workplace resilience. When a young person begins their first job, they enter what psychologists call the learning curve phase. The learning curve refers to the period when someone is still developing competence in a new environment. During this stage, tasks feel unfamiliar, feedback is frequent, and mistakes are common. For example, a teenager working their first restaurant job may struggle to remember table numbers, menu items, or the pace of service. A young adult working retail may initially feel overwhelmed by customer interactions, point-of-sale systems, or inventory procedures. These early challenges are normal. They are part of the learning process that eventually leads to competence and confidence. However, if a young person has a low tolerance for friction, the learning curve can feel intolerable. Instead of interpreting mistakes as part of growth, the young person may interpret them as evidence that the job is wrong for them. Parents may see this when their child comes home after a shift and says something like, "The manager was rude," or "They expect too much," or "This job just isn't for me." Often the real issue is not the job itself. The issue is the discomfort of the learning phase. Another important factor in this pattern is anxiety avoidance. Anxiety avoidance refers to the tendency to escape situations that create emotional discomfort. When someone experiences anxiety in a new environment, their brain's threat detection system, known as the amygdala, becomes activated. The amygdala scans the environment for potential danger. While it is designed to protect us from physical threats, it also reacts to social stress such as criticism, embarrassment, or uncertainty. For example, a young adult might feel intense discomfort when a manager corrects their performance in front of coworkers. The correction may trigger feelings of embarrassment or inadequacy. If the young adult avoids the situation by quitting the job, their anxiety immediately decreases. This relief reinforces the avoidance behavior, making it more likely they will avoid similar situations in the future. Parents may see this pattern when their child repeatedly leaves jobs shortly after encountering conflict or criticism. Another factor influencing workplace persistence is executive functioning. Executive functioning refers to the brain's ability to plan, organize, initiate tasks, regulate emotions, and sustain attention toward goals. The brain region responsible for executive functioning is the prefrontal cortex, which continues developing into the mid-20s. For young adults, especially those with ADHD or executive functioning challenges, managing workplace expectations can feel overwhelming. For example, a young adult may struggle to wake up early for shifts, remember schedules, manage multiple tasks simultaneously, or regulate emotions when a supervisor provides feedback. Parents may see this when their child repeatedly forgets shifts, arrives late to work, or becomes overwhelmed by multitasking responsibilities. These behaviors do not necessarily reflect a lack of ability. They often reflect a developing brain that is still learning how to manage complex environments. Bowen Family Systems theory reminds us that patterns around responsibility often involve the entire family system. When a young adult repeatedly quits jobs, parents may respond by stepping in to reduce the stress. They may provide financial support, extend living arrangements, or lower expectations temporarily. While these responses often come from love and concern, they can unintentionally reinforce the pattern if the young adult never experiences the natural consequences of leaving employment. Bowen described this dynamic as overfunctioning and underfunctioning within families. One member of the system may begin taking on more responsibility while another member takes on less. For example, a parent may begin managing finances, housing, and daily responsibilities for the young adult. The young adult may then remain dependent on that support. Shifting this dynamic requires gradual changes that encourage responsibility while still maintaining connection and support. The goal for families is not to force young adults into perfect jobs immediately. The goal is to help them build workplace resilience, which is the ability to remain engaged in a job long enough to learn the skills required for success. Parents can support this process by encouraging young adults to commit to a minimum time frame before leaving a job. For example, a family might agree that the young adult will remain in a position for at least 3 months before deciding whether it is a good fit. This time frame allows the learning curve to pass and gives the young adult an opportunity to develop competence. Another strategy is helping young adults interpret feedback differently. Instead of viewing correction as criticism, parents can help them see feedback as information that supports improvement. Over time, these experiences help the brain build tolerance for workplace friction. To implement this, utilize this strategy that moves you, the parent, from a lecturer or rescuer to a non-anxious consultant. This script is designed to be used when your young adult is in a state of hyperarousal, panic, frustration, and is looking for the eject button. The I want to quit parental script. The goal here is differentiation. You are validating the emotion without validating the escape. You are staying in your own skin, so they are forced to stay in theirs. In phase 1, the goal is validating the friction without fixing it that is important to remember. Your young adult says, "I can't do this anymore. My boss is a jerk, the work is mind-numbing, and it's not worth the stress. I'm quitting tomorrow." Now you as the parent says, "I hear how incredibly frustrated you are. It sounds like today was one of those days where the friction of the job felt completely overwhelming. I can see your nervous system is in fight or flight mode right now." Then you move on to phase 2, maintaining the boundary, the consultant phase. I'm not going to tell you that you can't quit. You are an adult, and that is your choice. However, as we agreed in our sovereignty contract, if you choose to leave this job before having another one lined up, I will not be bridging the gap for your $50 weekly contribution or your personal expenses. The friction of unemployment will be yours to manage. Phase 3 is now encouraging the 15-minute stay. Before you make a final decision, I want to challenge you to stay in the discomfort for just 24 more hours. Don't quit in a state of high anxiety. Let's see if your window of tolerance can expand just enough to get through tomorrow's shift. How can you regulate your nervous system tonight so you can show up tomorrow, even if it's not ideal? The long-form perspective. Why holding the line is an act of love. When you use this script, You are performing a systemic intervention. By refusing to get angry or panic, you are detriangulating yourself from the conflict between the young adult and their boss. In the past, the triangle likely looked like this. The boss provides friction, the young adult reacts with anxiety, and the parent steps in to either fight the boss or soothe the child. This prevents the young adult from ever having a direct relationship with reality. When you stay neutral and point back to the micro-friction contract, you are forcing the young adult to face the natural consequences of their own choices. If you do not hold them responsible in this moment, you are teaching them that discomfort is a valid excuse for non-performance. You are reinforcing the idea that they are too fragile for the world. This is a form of systemic sabotage that leads to failure to launch. By holding the line, you are actually expressing the highest form of belief in them. You are saying, I believe you are strong enough to handle a bad boss. I believe you are capable of enduring boredom. I believe in your future more than I believe in your current discomfort. Conversely, holding the line is not an act of coldness. It is the highest expression of belief in their potential. When you refuse to lower the bar in the face of their distress, you are sending a powerful, nonverbal message. I believe you are strong enough to handle a difficult manager. I believe you are capable of outlasting boredom. I believe in your future more than I believe in your current discomfort. This stance provides the healthy friction necessary for the prefrontal cortex to take charge over the reactive limbic system. You are acting as a resilience coach, providing the resistance they need to build the mental and emotional calluses required for adulthood. Ultimately, this is about shifting the family's emotional thermostat. If the parent remains differentiated, grounded, and calm, despite the young adult's panic, the entire system is forced to recalibrate. The young adult can no longer lean on the parent's overfunctioning to regulate their own emotions. They are forced to develop their own internal locus of control. By staying firm, you are moving them out of the velvet cage of dependency and into a state of competence-based confidence. You are gifting them the realization that they can survive their own big feelings and emerge on the other side as a capable, self-directed adult. This process is the literal engine of neuroplasticity in action. Every time a young adult chooses to show up for that one extra shift, despite a nervous system screaming for the relief of quitting, they are lifting a weight in a psychological gym. They are providing their brain with a corrective experience, proving to the amygdala that discomfort is not a death sentence, and that they do not have to eject from a situation to be safe. Over time, these repeated micro-victories build a workplace callus, transforming a fragile avoidance response into the steady, durable persistence required for a long-term career. As a parent, adopting this stance requires a difficult internal shift. You must stop viewing yourself as a guard or a punisher and start seeing yourself as a resilience coach. A coach doesn't help an athlete by taking the weights off the bar. They help by ensuring the athlete is lifting a manageable load that will actually result in muscle growth. By refusing to let their psychological muscles atrophy in the velvet cage of a friction-free home, you are performing the highest act of advocacy. You are protecting their future capacity by refusing to overprotect their current comfort. When you hold this line, you are essentially rewriting the family's emotional blueprint. From a Bowen family systems perspective, you are practicing differentiation of self, staying connected and empathetic, while refusing to be infected by their panic. This emotional neutrality is the traction they need. If you remain calm and firm, they are eventually forced to find their own footing. You aren't being tough, you are being grounded. You are providing the stable environment necessary for them to develop the grit, executive function, and distress tolerance that no therapist or medication can give them. They must earn it through the healthy friction of lived experience. This episode is for educational purposes and to provide support. It is not a substitute for professional mental health evaluation, diagnosis, or treatment. The more we learn to recognize the patterns behind behavior, the more compassion and support we can offer to our kids, our partners, and ourselves. If this episode resonated with you and you would like additional support for your family, you can reach out directly by email at stephanieb@thepathtopeacetherapy.com. If you are in California, I offer virtual sessions for families navigating ADHD, executive functioning challenges, anxiety, and family dynamics. You can also learn more about my work at thepathtopeacetherapy.com. And as always, take a deep breath, give yourself some grace, and remember, peace is possible, and you don't have to do this alone.